Now, full disclosure, I really don't like Metroidvanias. The way they typically do the level design just feels really arbitrary to just tackling on useless time of your gameplay with the constant annoying backtracking, but Dark Devotion just might have changed that all. I'm Sunny, this is Sunnyside TV. Let's review Dark Devotion here on the Nintendo Switch. Now, before I go any further, if you guys can consider hitting that like button if you enjoy this review, and sub to the channel for more gameplay and game reviews of new games on the Nintendo Switch. But Dark Devotion is a Metroidvania 2D roguelite Dark Souls action RPG-like game with a very dark atmosphere. Now, that is definitely a mouthful, but what Dark Devotion does is pull a little bit from all sorts of genres, and they come into this beautiful dark blend of a pixel graphic game that I actually had a really hard time putting down. Now, there is a vague story here that I didn't really fully understand, but the game does feature some rich lore to explore and even a full library room dedicated that gets unlocked when you start finding books and pages of things littered throughout the map. Now, I'm not one to sit here and take it all in and read all this text, but the option is there to understand why this world is so depressing and why you, this Templar, are in this dark place trying to rid this evil in the world. Now, I'm going to jump straight into the combat, as this is the core and heart of the game. You have a lot of ways to tackle the combat due to how loot works here. There is loot drops and different types of weapons and even magic that you can use that has a limited use. Loot can drop from normal enemies and become a permanent arsenal that your blacksmith can create, and each boss kill drops a permanent weapon and blueprint that you can use after each run. So you have different weapons with different ways of tackling combat. The big two-handers, which were my preference for a while, and especially in the early game due to the range and damage they were using, were fun. But of course, in a Dark Souls-like game which has its drawbacks, since the game does feature a stamina bar, swinging a massive two-hander will of course drain your stamina faster, and with not having a consistent way to block like having a shield, you're left to primarily use the roll mechanic as your primary defensive measure. Dodging and blocking are key because the game doesn't give you a ton of health to survive on to begin with. You can also go the route of a one-hander and a shield, or a one-hander and a magic combo, with the shield being an effective way to defend yourself or use some magic combination with a one-hander. The game also features double daggers or double claws, with the secondary of being able to roll even quicker and use less stamina than a normal roll. The game's options on how do you want to approach combat is completely on you. Granted, you do need to find the recipe so you can use these weapons anytime, but honestly, I didn't have much trouble doing that. I also loved how the game features this loot mechanic, as every time you downed a boss, you would get an epic item that was usually highlighted with different colors to show its effectiveness versus the normal weapons you'd find in the world. When you find these items and you die and you go back to your main hub area and you visit the blacksmith, you then can choose a layout of the things that you've unlocked through your playthrough, and the blacksmith will make it for you, and you're set off with your combat style and choice. And I loved how I never felt like I was starting from scratch with this system. Now, while the combat is basic with just swinging your one-hander or two-hander and dodging and blocking with a shield, the combat can get twitchy and strategic like on boss fights. I loved these boss fights so much. For one, they were super unique looking and always felt like an epic encounter. And two, while you would need multiple attempts to learn the mechanics of the fight, the game always had the bosses change it up, and nothing was ever choreographed in regards to which abilities the bosses would use in some form of an order. Instead, the bosses would react to your movements and what attacks it would use at this point. There was a lot of me looking for the boss's cues on which attacks it would use, and even to the point where visually it wasn't enough. You would need to listen to sound in order to understand when an attack was coming. The boss fights were brilliant for the most part, though not every boss was a winner, as there was a few who were a slight duds. Now, I mentioned how this is a roguelite with Metroidvania aspects, but it doesn't do the Metroidvania or the roguelite elements in an annoying and sometimes overly used way like a lot of games do with these types of genres. The maps and rooms that you go through are fairly linear, so you won't be backtracking until you restart from an area, and the game always had you headed towards a boss no matter which path you took. While the rooms have multiple paths for you to venture through, I personally like this because I liked how even if I went one way instead of another, I knew I was headed to a boss. If I ever did backtrack to hit rooms I missed for unlockables, all I had to do was hit one of the shortcuts the game provides. So I never felt annoyed traveling through the map, even after death that would essentially have you restart a few of the rooms. Now, as for the core mechanics, to say that this game got me hooked is an understatement. There is so many things that intertwine beautifully together to come up with a great blend of core mechanics that I enjoyed. For instance, the roguelite aspect to this game was well done. Every run, as long as you killed an enemy, you were progressing towards a better character. Killing enemies gives you these points that stack up, and this stacking up will lead to a skill tree that you can invest in that gives you buffs you can utilize for your playstyle or just in general to have a better advantage. The game also has these permanent buffs that you can find by finding tablets throughout the map that can give you more stamina, damage, crit chance, and faith. Now, faith is a unique mechanic that you use to pray at altars, and these altars can lead to a new pathway or rooms in the map. Praying at other altars can cure you of diseases that you get randomly or heal you, or another altar can drop items for you to use, and you gain faith by killing enemies. What I think that I liked the most was how in some of my early playthrough, even without all these buffs I eventually unlocked later on, I was able to defeat one of the harder bosses without hardly anything but me learning the mechanics and learning the fight and just being a skilled gamer. You don't need to backtrack to find more tablets or more unlockables if you don't want, if you're good enough. But if you aren't and you like exploring, you're rewarded for that in the form of all these permanent buffs to your character. Now, the skill tree is pretty basic. You can buff your speed movement or get a skill that gives you fire immunity. The list of traits to unlock is decent, but really what you could do is, because these boss fights were all pretty different, you would use the skill tree in conjunction with the blacksmith on creating a style that was most effective at beating a specific boss. Now, on certain bosses, me tackling it with a two-hander was effective because of the range of my weapon and me being able to keep my distance, but in other fights I needed to be up close in the action, so I had to use a sword and shield and be in the boss's face to have any effective chance at winning. Now, I could have beaten these bosses with a preferred playstyle if I wanted to be a masochist, because it's possible, but I was always eager to see what beating a boss would yield in terms of a reward. So it's a mixture of the way Dark Devotion handles loot with upgrades to your tree and tablets that I never minded backtracking to some areas because I liked how I was improving my character for the harder challenges ahead. But I also loved knowing none of it was necessary if I just grinded out the mechanics of a fight. Now, one negative, and really the only thing that I could come up with, is how the game handled your life points. Keep in mind, each time an enemy hits you, you lose an armor or a life heart. The game lets you pick up armor and a trinket, which will both dictate how much life you have. Armor pieces that I found can go up to about 6 armor hits, and a trinket could go up to about 6 hearts as well, but that was just one time that I was able to find both of those items in conjunction with each other. Unfortunately, this is all random what you find, and in terms of the armor, I never found anything that gave me more than 3 armor as a permanent basis. It's possible I never found a better armor blueprint that gave me more, but the trinkets were not something that you could get at the blacksmith, so that part would be random no matter what. So even though the game features a teleport system to put you right back at a boss fight after you fail an attempt, you would be going without the items you had acquired leading up to the boss, using the default blacksmith layout, which could be inferior to what you had been collecting for an hour plus in your run. The game also has these items that drop off enemies, and 2 of the items that helps you with health and armor are bandages and armor repair kits, but once again, this was random and you'd have to hope to get lucky on drops of these. I guess my complaint is I would have liked to see something maybe a little bit more predictable in this sense, but honestly, this is a minor complaint overall, and really I'm just kind of grasping at straws at this point. Now, some people will look at Dark Devotion's pixel art style as a negative, but for me, I liked it. The game is dark, depressing, and dangerous, and the game does a good job of showing that. It's not going to win any awards in the aesthetics department, but I think it fit well, and the game's soundtrack and sound effects do an excellent job of drawing you in. The game also runs extremely well and never once had any hiccups of any kind no matter what was happening on the screen, and the game just runs really great on handheld, and it's a great way to play Dark Devotion. In the end, Dark Devotion brings a mixture of different types of genres together to put a well-done Dark Souls-like indie game with some of the most fun boss types I've gotten to go up against, and a fun map to explore and uncover its secrets. The controls for the combat are tight and responsive, which they need to be, as a split-second decision-making is the only way to survive some of these encounters. The game's difficulty is on point in conjunction with how you want to make your life easier or harder on yourself by exploring or not exploring. Everything works in a harmonious way with Dark Devotion, and in the end I couldn't recommend this game more, and it's in my top 5 of indie games of the year. My final score for Dark Devotion is a 9 out of 10, with really not much to complain about. I got about 15 hours in and I wasn't even halfway through the content and didn't come close to finding all the tablets and unlockables. There's at least 18 bosses, not including the mini ones you find in the map, so there is a ton of content packed here, and I feel like you're definitely getting your money's worth. don't hesitate to pick this one up at 20 bucks. And I would say it's a must buy if you're looking for a Dark Souls-like game or you love Metroidvanias. Alright guys, that's going to be it for me on this review. If you've liked it, please consider hitting that like button and sub to the channel for more gameplay and game reviews, and hit that notification button to find out when new videos from Sunnyside TV go up. But I want to say thank you for watching. I'm Sunny, and like always, I hope you all have a sunny day.